I stood in the hallway, the folder from my surgeon still clutched in my hands, as I heard my son's voice echo from the kitchen. "Why waste money on her?" he said, casual and cold, like I wasn't 10 feet away. My name was on that surgery, my body, my future, but to him, I was just a line item. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I walked into the bank, alone, and found out just how far he'd already gone. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon polish and old books. Helen stood still, cradling the folder from Dr. Epstein's office like it might crumble in her hand. The faint click of her shoes against the hardwood had stopped the moment she heard voices. Tracy's voice, sharp and careless, drifting through the crack in. "It's just a hip replacement," Tracy said, her tone flippant. "She's old. It's not like it'll fix everything." A laugh. Not hers. Aaron. Then his voice, lower but perfectly clear through the speakerphone. "Why waste money on her? That fund's better off for the kids. Let's be smart here." Helen didn't move, not even a breath. Her eyes fell to the manila folder in her name printed neatly on the tab. Inside, pre-op instruction, post-op medication list, diagrams of a joint she still hadn't memorized, things she'd studied with care, out of quiet hope. The kind of hope that felt almost indecent to admit at her age. Outside the door, Tracy sighed. "Well, you already canceled it under her name. Just make sure she doesn't find out for a few more weeks." "I won't say a word," Aaron replied, with a confidence that sliced clean. Helen didn't drop the folder, she simply sat down. Right there on the hallway bench under the framed photo of their wedding in Vermont, autumn leaves and smiles that now felt like a lie she had lived inside. She didn't cry. Not yet. The sounds in the kitchen faded into clinking mugs and the buzz of a phone being picked up. Life, continuing, as if they hadn't just gutted her without even knowing she was standing 10 feet away. She opened the folder and read the words again. "Surgery schedule, September 23rd, 9:15 a.m. She traced the date with her fingertip. It had been circled in red at her last visit, except now it wasn't happening. She didn't know how he'd canceled it. Maybe he'd used her patient portal. Maybe he'd called pretending to be her. Maybe he didn't even need to just used her name and social security like he was picking up groceries. The thought of him doing it so casually, her stomach twists. A knock pulled her back to the surface. Darlene. The front door creaked open, and the scent of vanilla lotion wafted in before Helen could speak. "Helen?" Darlene's voice was soft but carried weight, the kind that knew things before they were said. "You left your text on read. You okay?" Helen turned her head slowly. Darlene was already walking in, purse slung on one shoulder, sunglasses still perched on her head. "Don't come in here," Helen said, but the words came out hollow. Darlene paused. Her eyes flicked to Helen's hands, then to the open folder on her lap. Something in her face shifted, concern moving toward something sharper. She shut the front door behind her with a soft click. "What happened?" Helen's lips trembled, but her voice didn't. "He used my name to cancel the surgery." Silence fell between them like a dropped glass. Darlene stepped forward, slowly, like she was approaching someone who had just been in a wreck. She sat beside her, hands folded neatly in her lap. "Are you sure?" "I heard them. Tracy and Aaron, on speakerphone." Helen's voice cracked now, barely above a whisper. "They said it wasn't worth the money, that I'm too old." Darlene's jaw clenched, but she didn't interrupt. "I thought maybe he'd just forgotten. Maybe the reschedule notice hadn't come in, but they—" Helen shook her head. "They decided, without telling me." The folder slipped from her hands and hit the floor with a soft flutter. Darlene picked it up, eyes scanning the content. "Jesus," she muttered. "This isn't a canceled hair appointment. This is surgery." "I know." Outside, a car door laughter. The front gate creaked open, Tracy's laugh again, cutting the air like scissors through silk. Helen didn't move. Neither did Darlene, but Helen's eyes no longer looked lost. They looked focused. Helen waited until the laughter outside faded, until the slam of the car door signaled Tracy's departure, and the house fell back into its ear hush. Darlene was still seated on the hallway bench beside her, hands clasped like she was waiting for permission. "I need to check something," Helen murmured. She stood slowly, her hip aching from the sudden movement, and walked toward the kitchen with quiet precision. Darlene followed at a distance, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. The drawer beneath the phone nook hadn't been opened in years. It stuck on one side before it gave way with a rasping groan. Inside, a tangle of rubber bands, old receipts, expired coupons, and a stack of envelopes so worn their corners had curled into soft feathers. Helen sifted through them like she was sifting through time itself. Gas bill from 2014. A holiday card from her sister, long dead. An article she'd clipped about healthy eating for seniors. Then her fingers paused on a brown accordion folder, its tab labeled in her late husband's handwriting, Legal Estate. She pulled it out and brought it to the table, spreading the contents carefully. Darlene stood by the doorway, not speaking, watching her with eyes that knew better than to offer empty comfort. And there it was, durable power of attorney sign, notarized, dated 3 months after Tom's stroke. Aaron's name listed plainly, twice, once as the primary, once more in the clause giving him authority over medical decision. Helen stared at it. It was written in fire. Her hands began to shake. Not from fear, something worse. The kind of rage that simmers in the bone, the kind that shows up without warning, silent but absolute. I never updated it, she said, almost to herself. Darlene stepped closer. What is it? She slid the document across the table. Darlene read it once, then again slower. Jesus Christ, she breathed. He still has legal control? Helen nodded. I thought I changed everything after Tom passed, she said, voice brittle. I went through the house, the bank, the titles, but I must have missed this. I must have thought I'd never need it again. Darlene's lips parted like she wanted to say something but thought better of it. I gave him that responsibility when Tom was sick. He stepped in, helped with doctors, filled prescriptions. I thought it made sense. Her voice cracked. I didn't know he'd use it to silence me. You didn't know he'd turn into this, Darlene said gently. Helen pushed her chair back. No, but I know what he is now. She didn't cry. There were no more tears to give to that man. Not after what she'd heard. Not after finding proof that he had the legal key to lock her out of her own body. I'm calling Liam, she said, already moving toward the landline. He handled Tom's estate. If anyone can help me yank this power away from Aaron, it's him. The phone rang only once before Liam answered. Helen, he said, warm but surprised. It's been a while. Everything all right? No, she said. I need to come in first thing tomorrow. It's about the power of attorney. I made a mistake. One I need to fix fast. Liam didn't ask questions. I'll have it on my desk by 8. Come early. We'll go through everything. Helen hung up, the resolve hardening in her like ice. Across the room, Darlene had picked up the folder, eyes scanning the rest. He could do more, she said quietly. With this document, not just cancel your surgery, he could move your accounts, make decisions about your property, depending on what's linked. Helen nodded. Then she looked out the window, where twilight was just beginning to slip over the neighborhood. The quiet hum of sprinklers, a dog barking 2 houses down, everything ordinary on the surface, but something under it had shifted. She wasn't just someone's forgotten mother anymore. She was a woman with something to take back. The bank's waiting area smelled like industrial carpet and vanilla-scented air freshener. Helen sat stiffly in one of the blue upholstery, her cane resting against her knee, the morning light catching the edge of the manila folder in her lap. Darlene sat beside her, tapping one polished nail against the armrest. She hadn't said much during the drive over, only that she'd cleared her morning and wouldn't let Helen walk into this alone. A receptionist in a teal blouse glanced up from her desk. Ms. Everhart? Miles can see you now. Helen nodded, stood, and walked with quiet purpose past the potted fica, past the framed charity posters and smiling stock photos. The door to Miles's office opened, and he greeted her with a warm but slightly confused smile. Helen, he said, stepping around his desk. It's been a while. Please, come in. Darlene followed close behind. Helen sat first, placed the folder on the desk, and folded her hands over it. I need to review the activity on the joint medical, she said evenly. The one ending in 3285. Miles blinked, then glanced at it. Sure. Give me just a second to pull that up. His fingers tapped across the keyboard. Is this about a suspicious charge, or? Helen said nothing. She just watched his face. It didn't take long. His expression shifted, brows lips thinned. There was a withdrawal, he said. 10 days ago. Quite a large one. Helen nodded once. Print it for Miles has. It was made in person. Someone used their access credential. The system shows a signature match. Aaron Everhart, Helen said. His silence was answer enough. Darlene leaned forward. He took out money from her account? Miles cleared his throat. Technically, it's a joint access account. He's an authorized party. You added him 3 years ago after your husband passed. Helen remembered it clearly now, sitting in this same room after Tom's funeral, hands trembling too hard to sign checks, too numb to handle logistics. Aaron had been helpful back then, efficient, caring, emergency access, just in case. How much? She asked. Miles turned the screen toward 17,500. Darlene let out a soft whistle. That's not a helping hand. That's a gut punch. Helen kept her eyes on the screen. It showed the date, time, branch location, just 20 minutes from Aaron's law office. She reached for the printed slip Miles handed over and stared at the signature. His handwriting hadn't changed. Still sharp, still smug. Miles glanced between them. If you believe this was a misuse of funds, we can open a fraud inquiry. But since he's listed, it's a legal gray area. Helen looked up. Her voice was low but certain. Not anymore. It's not. He used it like it was his. Miles frowned. I'd recommend removing his access immediately. You can do that today. Darlene leaned in, voice low but fierce. Not anymore, he won't. Helen didn't look at her. Her gaze stayed locked on the withdrawal slip. $17,500. For what? It wasn't for her surgery. It wasn't for anything she'd authorized. What had he spent it on? Or worse, who? Do you keep camera footage from the branch? She asked quietly. Miles nodded. For 30 days. Why? Helen tucked the slip into her folder. I want a copy of the footage from that day. I'll file a formal request if I have to. He didn't ask why, just nodded again and began typing. Helen stood. Her hip ached, but she barely felt it now. They walked back through the lobby in silence until Darlene broke it. You okay? She asked gently. Helen didn't answer at first. Then, as they reached the car, she said, I'm starting to understand something. What? If someone shows you exactly who they are, what they think you're worth, believe them the first time. Liam's office hadn't changed much in the 10 years since Helen last sat across from him. Still the same dark green walls, still the antique brass lamp buzzing faintly near the window, and still the stacks of legal pads and folders towering like small monuments to paperwork across every horizontal surface. It was cozy, lived in, a space for sorting chaos into calm. Helen settled into the high back chair across from his desk and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. I read everything last night, Liam said, pushing his glasses higher on his nose. You were right to call. Darlene sat in the corner, silent, her bag in her lap and her eyes sharp. She hadn't left Helen's side all morning. Liam pulled a manila folder from the stack nearest him and opened it with practiced care. We're revoking Aaron's durable power of attorney immediately. It takes effect the moment you sign. I've already drafted a replacement with Darlene as your backup designee. She'll have financial and medical authority only if you're unable to make decisions yourself. You're still in full control. Helen gave a small nod. I trust her, she said simply. Liam smiled at Darlene. That's not something I write into legal language, but it matters. He passed her a pen. Helen didn't hesitate. She read each page slowly with full attention, the way she had read bedtime stories to Aaron when he was young, line by line, voice even, heart steady. And then she signed, on every line that mattered. Each signature felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. When it was done, Liam tapped the final page and slid it into the new folder. You're covered now, he said. I'll file it with the clerk's office today and send certified copies to the hospital and your insurance provider. I've already notified the bank to freeze his access and replace it with yours exclusively. Everything else is just logistic. Helen placed the pen back down gently. The faint scent of lemon wood polish from the desk reminded her of his study, the one room he never let anyone else. Her fingers hovered over the folder for a moment longer than necessary. He doesn't get to touch my life like that anymore, she said. No, Liam agreed. He doesn't. The office fell into a soft hush. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, painting narrow stripes across the rug. Then Liam's assistant knocked twice and pushed the door open, holding out the office phone. It's Miles, she said, from the bank. Helen's brow furrowed as she took Miles? Hi, Ms. Everhart. I wouldn't call you again so soon if it weren't important. I wanted to give you a heads up. I've just received the image of the check tied to that large withdrawal. Helen leaned slightly forward, heart pacing faster but her voice calm. What about it? You may want to see it in person, Miles said. There's something strange about the memo line and the endorsement signal. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up, stood, and reached for her cane. Liam watched her, concern edging into his voice. Is everything? Helen met his eyes. I think I'm about to find out something I didn't. He didn't press her, just nodded once, then slid the signed document into a labeled envelope. Whatever it is, he said. You're not walking into it alone anymore. Helen gave a quiet, grateful smile, then turned toward the door. Darlene was already on her. opening it. And just like that, they left the office, not with fear, but with certainty. The image on Miles's desk said everything Helen needed. The scanned check was printed in bold ink with her account number, her name, and Aaron's unmistakable signature. The memo line read, Consulting Retainer, AE Law, PLLC. The gall of it made her feel physically ill. Darlene leaned over her shoulder and stared at the screen, mouth slightly open. He paid himself. Helen said nothing at first. She looked at the amount again. 17,500, the same figure. The same money meant for her post-surgical gone into her son's business account like it was owed to him. Miles tapped the corner of the screen. This makes things clearer. It wasn't a medical it's not even personal. This was a business payment drawn from a medical fund. That shifts us into a different legal category entirely. Helen didn't blink. Then file the paperwork. Miles nodded and reached for a form. We'll submit an official fraud alert and begin the account investigation. I'll also freeze the remaining balance of the shared fund immediately. You'll still have access, but nothing leaves this account without your direct signature. Pen only, no digital approvals. Helen took the form and signed, her pen steady. She could feel something inside her click into place. Not revenge, not yet, but control. And that was something no one had handed her in weeks. As they exited the bank, her phone buzzed. Aaron's name flashed across the screen. She paused outside, sunlight cutting a sharp angle across the sidewalk, and answered. Hi, Mom, Aaron said, voice warm, too warm. Been meaning to check in. How's your hip? Feeling any better? Helen didn't sit down, didn't adjust the cane that had become more of a prop than a necessity. Healed enough, she said, voice low. Healed enough to walk into the bank, silent, not even a breath from him. Then the call dropped. Not a word, just the empty click of cowardice. Helen slid the phone back into her purse, lips pressed thin. Darlene said nothing, but the proud glint in her eyes said plenty. Back at the house, Darlene moved around the kitchen like it was hers, heating the kettle, pulling out the good mugs from the back of the cabinet, the ones Helen hadn't used since Tom passed, the ones with the gold trim and the weight that felt like they belonged to a slower, steadier time. She set one in front of Helen and poured the ginger to walking into bank, Darlene said with a quiet smile. Helen raised the mug, clinked it lightly against her friend's, to walking out stronger. The warmth of the tea settled into her chest, the quiet of the room no longer suffocating but solid, safe. She looked at the framed photo of her and Tom taken at the Cape, both of them laughing into the salt air. She let herself stare a moment longer. By late afternoon, Liam had sent over the restitution. The envelope was thick, several pages of legal documentation outlining the misuse of funds, the revocation of Aaron's access, and the intent to pursue return of the full amount, plus damages, if not resolved privately in 10 business. Helen signed each page without hesitation, her initials crisp. Darlene reviewed every line beside her, one hand resting lightly over Helen. This isn't just paperwork, she said. This is a line in the sand. Helen didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her name, once used against her, was now the signature of someone no longer willing to be erased. The hold music had looped 4 times already, a chirpy piano rendition of You Are My Sunshine that Helen was starting to hate with every molecule of her being. She sat at the dining table, phone wedged between shoulder and ear, her laptop open to her Medicare Advantage. The progress bar spun like it knew she didn't have the energy for another surprise today. Across the table, Darlene hovered silently, arms crossed, eyes narrowed like she was ready to leap into the ring herself. Finally, a real voice crackled through the line. Thank you for waiting, Mrs. Everhart. We've located your file, and it appears your Medicare Advantage upgrade was officially revoked last month by someone listed as your healthcare proxy. The file shows Aaron Everhart. Helen interrupted, her voice low, measured. I didn't authorize that. There was a pause. Well, as your listed proxy at the time, he would have had full access. But if you're saying this revocation was done without your informed consent, we'll need to initiate a restoration request and audit trail. Do it, Helen said. Darlene took a small step forward, put it on speaker. Helen hit the button and set the phone down. You're on speaker. My friend in legal backup is with me. The rep cleared her throat. Of course, I'll begin the digital re-enrollment now, but full restoration could take several business. We'll also need you to submit a formal complaint so this can be escalated. Do you have access to a printer? We have a lawyer, Darlene cut in. Helen's fingers moved over the keyboard with slow precision, following the steps the rep dictated. Each click reminded her how fast trust could be stripped away, even in the most impersonal places. Across the living room, Karen arrived like a gust of righteous. She didn't knock, just marched in with a binder, a travel mug, and the kind of expression that said someone was about to get professionally shredded. I heard, Karen said flatly. He tampered with your Medicare? Helen nodded once, jaw tight. Cancelled the upgrade, probably to push me toward a cheaper plan while he was still holding the purse string. Or to sabotage your recovery altogether, Karen said. Because if he can't profit from you, why would he care if you had access to better coverage? Helen didn't flinch. Exactly. Karen sat, pulled out her laptop, and began typing. You'll have a confirmation email before the hour's out. I'll attach Liam's revocation documents to your restoration file. They'll take one look at your new proxy list and expedite them. Darlene handed Helen a glass of water without being asked. How long has he been doing this to you, Helen? Really? Helen took the glass but didn't answer, because the answer didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that she'd stopped him. By noon, the re-enrollment was confirmed, her upgraded plan restored, audit request submitted, formal complaint logged with CMS. By 2, a new email pinged in her inbox from Miles. Subject: New medical account ready body. Hi Helen, just wanted to let you know your new medical fund account is fully active. All prior permissions have been revoked. You are the sole signatory. Let me know if you'd like to set up multi-layer verification. Best. Miles. Helen exhaled through her nose. Relief didn't come like a wave. It came like the slow thaw after a bitter winter. She leaned back in her chair and looked out the window. The maple tree outside was just starting to turn, golden edges beginning to nibble at the green. Darlene refilled her mug without asking. Karen zipped her binder shut. You're not just getting your life back, Karen said quietly. You're rewriting the ending. Helen picked up the phone again and dialed Liam. When he answered, she didn't waste. He's not just careless, she said. He's dangerous. There was a pause on the other end, then Liam's voice, quiet but steady. Then we treat him that way. Helen nodded to no one. Yes, she said. We do. The glow of Helen's laptop lit up the kitchen like a second sunrise. She hadn't used Facebook in months, maybe longer, but after the Medicare call, after the new account, after the restitution paperwork, curiosity had tugged at her. Just enough. She clicked into her notifications, and there they were. Tracy Everhart posted a photo. The caption, "It's always the ungrateful ones who rewrite history." Below it, a filtered selfie of Tracy in her car, lips tight, brow furrowed with just the right amount of. Helen knew that face well. It was the same one Tracy wore at funerals and family reunions. Performance grief. Helen didn't react, didn't like, didn't comment. She kept scrolling. Another post, 20 minutes later. Some people forget who drove them to doctors, who sat in waiting room, who sacrificed. 6 likes, 2 sad face reaction, 1 comment from Aaron's cousin Janet. Hope you're okay, Trace. You've done so much for her. Helen closed the laptop gently and she poured herself a cup of the lukewarm coffee from the French press Darlene had left earlier that morning. The scent of cardamom still lingered. Darlene's doing, she always added a pinch, said it made coffee taste like clarity. The phone buzzed on the counter. Text message. Cousin Marla. Hey, just saw some weird stuff online. Is everything all right? You need anything? Then another. Uncle Terry. Call me when you can. What's going on with Tracy? Helen typed only one reply. To all of them. Ask Aaron. No emoji, no follow-up. She set the phone down, took a long sip of her coffee, and opened her note. The legal pad had become her ledger. Nothing dramatic, just columns, dates, and dollar amount. Karen had helped her estimate how much of her medical fund had already been used improperly, and Helen now tracked every penny left like it was oxygen. Darlene walked in mid-sip, already in sneakers and a zip-up hoodie, sunglasses. You see the circus? Helen didn't look up. Oh, I saw it. Tracy's Facebook fingers are working overtime. She's good at making things look like martyrdom. Darlene pulled a piece of toast from the counter and tore off a bite. Let her hang herself. The more she posts, the less she realizes she's giving herself away. No need to push. People watch long enough. They figure out who's faking. Helen flipped to the next page of her. Aaron's going to spin it. Say I'm confused, that I'm being manipulated. He doesn't get to narrate anymore, Darlene said, brushing crumbs off. You lock that door. The kettle clicked off behind them. Helen poured hot water over another tea bag and sat down. Across the table, Darlene watched her with a softness that didn't dull the steel beneath. You tired? Helen nodded. Yes, but it's a different kind of tired. Still feel like giving up? No, Helen said. Not even a little. The two women sat in silence for a long moment. just the ticking of the wall clock filling the room. Outside, leaves rustled in a sudden gust, summer trying to hang on, but fall already scratching at the edges. Then Helen's phone buzzed again. This time, it was subject, reschedule confirmation, body, got it. Dr. Epstein's office confirmed an October 12th, 9:15 a.m., full surgical support team in place, insurance approved, you're back on the calendar. Helen stared at the screen for several seconds, long enough that Darlene leaned forward slightly. Everything all right? Helen didn't answer right. She just smiled. A real one, small, but solid. The kind of smile that didn't need to be earned through anyone else's. Then she turned the notebook toward Darlene and began writing the next list. This one wasn't about money. It was about names. The knock came just after noon. 3 firm raps. No doorbell. Just the kind of knock that tried to sound casual, but had control tucked underneath it. Helen stood perfectly still in the kitchen, mug in hand. Outside, the breeze moved through the oak tree. It was holding its breath. Darlene looked up from the sofa, her phone halfway to her face. Helen didn't need to check the window. She already knew. She opened the door just enough to see his face. Aaron. Collar popped slightly like he'd rushed out, his hair combed too carefully. That manufactured expression, wide-eyed concern laced with a rehearsed kind of affection. He was still her son, and yet, not at all. Mom, he said, smiling like the world hadn't shifted beneath them. Just wanted to check on you. Helen didn't move to open the door any wider. You've been quiet, Aaron added, shifting his weight. Thought maybe you weren't feeling well. I'm fine, she said, tone flat. What do you want? He blinked. The smile faltered just for a beat. Then he shrugged. Look, I just wanted to clear the air. I feel like things have gotten weird. There's been some confusion. There's been no confusion, Helen said. Silence stretched between them. The porch creaked under his feet. I heard the bank froze the shared account, Aaron said. And the insurance thing. It sounds like maybe something got misunderstood. We should talk. You and me. No lawyers. Helen narrowed her eyes. You mean the accounts you emptied? His face twitched. I didn't empty anything, he said, voice slipping. I moved some money temporarily, and I had full authority at the time. You know that. You mean before you used my name to cancel my surgery? Before you wrote yourself a check out of a medical fund labeled emergency access only? Aaron's jaw tightened. You're letting other people twist this. No, Helen's. I'm finally untwisting it. He stepped forward slightly. She didn't move, didn't open the door any further. Mom, come on, I'm your son. You know I've always looked out for you. She tilted her head, calm as ice. You looked out for yourself. Something behind his eyes hardened. The concern dropped like a cheap mask. I've done everything for you, he snapped. Everything, when no one else would. You think Karen or Darlene gives a damn what happens when you're gone? You think they'll be the ones handling the fallout? Helen didn't blink. There won't be fallout. His mouth opened, but she cut him off. You've always assumed that being useful was the same thing as being good. It isn't. From the corner of her eye, she saw Darlene step out onto the porch behind her. She wasn't holding a cup of coffee this time. She was holding her phone, recording. Aaron's eyes darted toward her, and something shifted again. Calculation now. What is this? He said sharply. Accountability, Darlene said. Aaron let out a laugh, but it didn't reach his eyes. Seriously? You're pulling stunts now? Helen leaned against the doorframe, unbothered. You showed up uninvited, raised your voice. After what you've done, I have every right to document how you handle being told no. He took a step back, glancing around the quiet suburban street like he suddenly remembered where he was. You're being dramatic, he muttered. You're being recorded, Darlene replied. Smile if you want. He didn't. Helen's voice dropped low, measured. Don't come here again without calling first, and don't come to talk. Anything you have to say, send it to Liam, or the court. Aaron's nostrils flared. For a second she thought he might explode, but he didn't. He just stood there, stewing in silence, his control finally cracking at the seam. Then, without a word, he turned and walked down the steps. Not rushed, just defeated. Helen watched him go. Darlene lowered the phone slowly. I'm saving that one to the cloud, she said. Helen finally closed the door and leaned her hand again. Her breath was steady, her spine straight. That was the last visit, she said. Darlene didn't ask what she meant. She didn't have to. The envelope arrived just after 10 a.m., tucked neatly between a coupon flyer and a glossy real estate postcard no one had asked. Helen knew what it was before she touched it. The weight was right. The seal had Liam's signature watermark across the flap, and when she carried it inside, She did so with the care of someone carrying something final. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon oatmeal and old wood polish. The morning light cut soft across the counter. She sat at the table, slid a letter opener beneath the edge, and peeled the flap open slowly. Inside, 6 pages, each one clean, clipped, formal. Revocation of durable power of attorney, termination of financial agent authorization, full medical custodial reassignment, all signed, all stamped, all done. Helen laid them out on the table like cards in a game she'd already won. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. This wasn't joy. It was closure. The kind that came without fireworks, without music. Just a quiet line drawn through the last of Aaron's influence. She filed the papers in the drawer under the kitchen calendar, between an expired passport and a shoebox of Tom's old Veterans Affairs papers. They belonged there now, out of sight, no longer urgent. Next came the bank. She logged in with practiced ease, her cursor gliding to the Transfers tab. In less than 5 minutes, she'd moved the remainder of her untouched, everything not tied to the frozen mess, into a private credit union had helped her open. No joint access, no linked beneficiary, just Helen Everhart, full stop. When the confirmation window popped up, Helen let herself it came out shaky, like her ribs had been holding their breath for months. Around noon, Karen's email came through. Subject, pre-op checklist body. You know the drill. No food after midnight, cut out aspirin 3 days early, no driving yourself. I'll be outside at 7:45 sharp on the 12th, coffee in hand. Attached, checklist.pdf. Helen opened the attachment and scanned it carefully. It was a standard list, logical, practical, emotionless, and yet, every line felt like a milestone. She printed it and pinned it to the fridge under the Cape Cod magnet, the same one that used to hold up Aaron's childhood. That magnet hadn't moved in years. She sat for a while afterward, nursing a lukewarm cup and listening to it. Didn't feel like a battlefield anymore, just quiet, just hers. The air outside was mild, the kind of crisp that invited movement. Helen laced up her sneakers, white, slightly worn, still solid, and grabbed her cane. Not out of necessity, but precaution. She didn't need to prove anything. She just wanted to move. She walked the block slowly, then 2, then 3. The breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant barbecue. A neighbor waved from their porch. She lifted a hand and each step felt like a message to her body. We're still going. We're not done yet. At the end of the 3rd block, she sat on the bench at the cul-de-sac loop and stretched her leg gently. The hip still ached, but it was less than yesterday, less than the day before. The pain was no longer a threat. It was something she was walking. Back home, she refilled her water glass and pulled the curtain back just enough to let in the softer afternoon. Then her phone buzzed. Aaron. The message preview flashed before she could stop it. I know I messed. Tracy pushed a lot of it. I didn't mean for things to get so out of control. I just made mistakes. That's all they were. Mistakes. Helen stared at it for a long time. Not even her. Just clarity. He still thought this was salvageable. He still thought narrative was a form of power. Without opening the full message, she tapped once, scrolled down, and hit delete. Not archive. Not saved for later. Gone. There was no room for half apologies dressed in excuses. No more room for men who called betrayal mistakes. She turned back to the checklist on the fridge. Tomorrow, she'd prep her overnight, lay out her confirm with Dr. Epstein's office, and double-check the folder of insurance documents. She'd do it herself. Helen picked up her legal pad and flipped past the financial columns. She started a new page. This one wasn't labeled with dollar signs. This one had names, not of enemies, but of witnesses, and of women who stood still when things went sideways, and then started walking again. The email from Miles arrived just after sunrise. Helen was sipping her 2nd cup of coffee, the kitchen still quiet, the neighborhood not yet stirred. The subject line read simply, check image, confirmed, forgery. She clicked it open without hesitation. Inside was a single sentence, followed by an attachment. Helen, this is the scanned image I mentioned. Handwriting analysis suggests deliberate imitation. Legal team advised we retain original. M. She opened the file. There it was. A check made out to AE Law PLLC, signed in a shaky script meant to look like hers, but not quite. The slant was wrong. The loop on the H too tight. The tail of the N curled like someone who'd practiced it 5 times too many. Not forged in haste, forged with care and intent. Helen stared at the image for a long time, not to study it. She didn't need to. Her body already knew it wasn't. What she stared at was the sheer effort it had taken for Aaron to pretend, not just to manipulate, but to mimic, to crawl into the shape of her signature and make it his own. She picked up the phone. By mid-morning, she sat across from Liam in his office, the document now printed, sealed, and added to a growing folder labeled Financial Exploitation, HEVAE. It qualifies, Liam said plainly. Forgery, unauthorized withdrawal, breach of fiduciary duty. We're in formal complaint territory now. You're not just responding you're filing. Helen nodded once. Then let's file. He glanced up. The police may not move quickly, but you'll have documentation, and when it's official, he's no longer just a threat. He's a liability. Helen folded her hands in her lap. Good. Outside, the sky had begun to cloud. No rain yet, but the kind of afternoon where you'd carry an umbrella just in case. Darlene drove. The passenger seat was adjusted so Helen didn't have to strain her hip, though she insisted on getting in and out on her own. As they pulled into the parking lot of the local station, Darlene's hand hovered near Helen's elbow but never touched her. "You sure you want to do this today?" she asked. Helen closed the car door behind her. "I should have done it the moment I heard my name." The police station smelled faintly of floor-clean worn vinyl. A bored-looking officer at the front desk looked up as they approached. "I need to file a report," Helen said. "What kind of report, ma'am?" "Forgery. Financial abuse by a family member." That got his attention. 10 minutes later, she was seated with a clipboard, filling in dates and figures. Darlene sat beside her, flipping through the copy of the scanned check Liam had printed for her. When Helen handed the form over, her handwriting was steady, unapologetic. That afternoon, Karen called. "I've updated your chart," she said. "Under provider notes, I added that you're recovering from financial duress by a first-degree relative. That'll flag you for priority advocacy if you need post-op support or resource coordination." Helen didn't know what to say to that, only that it mattered, that someone believed her enough to put it in writing. Karen continued, her voice softer. "And I wanted to tell you, your Medicare Advantage plan is now fully confirmed. No flags, no holds. It's yours again, permanently." Helen closed her eyes. The hallway outside her bedroom was lit by late sunlight, painting long lines across the floor. "Thank you," she said, voice low. "Don't thank me. Just keep going." Helen sat at the kitchen table again that evening, the same spot where Erin had once joked about her budgeting spreadsheet, where Tracy had left half-finished coffee and murmured fake compliments about Helen's organizational. She pulled out her notebook, flipped past the column, past the checklist, and returned. She underlined Darlene, underlined Karen, added Liam. Then, finally, for the first time, she added her own, right at the top. Not because she needed recognition, but because she was done erasing herself from her own story. Liam's email draft was short, professional, and final. "Dear Mr. Everhart, at the request of my client, Mrs. Helen Everhart, all further communication is to be directed through this office. Any attempts to contact her personally, via phone, in person, or through third parties, will be documented and treated as harassment." Liam had read it aloud once, glancing over the rim of his glasses, waiting for her approval. Helen nodded without hesitation. "Send it." He hit send. One click. No drama, no emotion. Just the sound of a line being drawn in permanent ink. The next morning, Helen woke to a voicemail. She didn't recognize the number, but the transcript preview was enough. "You're ruining the family. You've turned this into something it never had to be." She pressed play once, listened with arms crossed. Erin's voice cracked midway through the message, like someone trying to cry on cue. "All this over money? Over a few mistakes? I've done everything for this family. Everything. And you're burning it down over a signature." Helen tapped before he could. The sound vanished mid-word, like a stage curtain pulled tight on a show no one wanted to watch. She didn't save it, didn't transcribe it. She didn't need another record. Some endings didn't require document. At the bank, she walked in without her key. Miles noticed right away, standing from his desk with a smile that said more than words ever could. "You look good," he said. "I feel clear," she replied, matching his smile. "That counts more than strong." He gestured to the papers spread across his desk. "All final today. We've rekeyed all account access, reissued new security credentials, and updated your online portal to include two-factor authentication tied only to your phone. No third-party authorization, no shared login." "Perfect." He slid the last form toward her. "This confirms you are sole authority on the health expense fund, and that all joint permissions, past and future, are fully revoked." Helen signed with a steady hand. I've also added something for your peace of mind. An automatic alert for any attempts to query your accounts using your name. Even if the request is declined, you'll be notified within 5 minutes. Good, she said, pushing the paper back across the desk. Let him try. Miles didn't respond, just gave her a quiet nod of respect. The kind you give someone who's no longer just surviving. As she stood to leave, he hesitated. One more thing? Yes, I don't know everything, he said, but I've seen a lot of people come through this office holding record. Not many rebuild with this kind. Helen didn't reply. She only gave him a look, one part gratitude, one part finality, and turned to go. Outside, the wind had picked. Leaves skated across the sidewalk in short, chaotic bursts. Across the street, someone had propped up a Halloween skeleton in a rocking chair, grinning out at the road like it was in on some. Helen drove herself to the clinic. Inside, she approached the front desk and gave her name. The receptionist, a young woman with flawless eyeliner and a clipboard of laminated forms, tapped into the system and smiled. I see your file here. Surgery on the 12th? That's right. I can pull up your emergency contact file now if you'd like to update it. Helen nodded. Please. She wrote Darlene's full name slowly and clearly on the line. Her phone number, her address. Under relationship to patient, she didn't hesitate. Trusted contact. No blood relation. No need. She handed it back. Got it, the receptionist said. We're all set. Helen walked out feeling lighter than she had in weeks. That afternoon, she sat at the dining room table with her last envelope. The paper inside was crisp. The letter had been reviewed by Liam, notarized and printed on bonded stationery. It wasn't sentimental. It wasn't cruel. It was final. She folded it once, slid it into the envelope, and sealed it with her thumb. Then she walked it out to the curbside mailbox and dropped it in without pause. It was addressed to Aaron E. Everhart, Esquire certified mail, required signature. She stood at the edge of the driveway for a long moment, watching the flag stand red against the breeze. Not because she was second-guessing, but because she wasn't. Not anymore. The pen in Helen's hand felt heavier than any she'd held that month. Not because of the weight, but because of what it meant. Liam sat across from her, documents spread neatly on the long mahogany conference, the same table where she and Tom had once signed their first, the same table where Aaron had sat during his father's estate read, looking proud, composed, and already calculated. Helen was rewriting all of it. Take your time, Liam said, voice quiet but sure. There's no rush. But Helen didn't need time. She'd taken years too long already. She signed the line with her full name. No initials, no hesitation. Then she turned the page. Another line. Another signature. She wasn't just removing, she was removing the illusion of obligation. When she reached the final page, Liam slid a new section toward her, one labeled Charitable Bequest. This language covers your request, he explained. 20% of the estate to the Franklin County Elder Care Foundation, earmarked for home health support grants. Helen read the paragraph twice. She could see it in her mind. Aids arriving at the doorsteps of women like her. Alone, recovering, overlooked. Women without Darlene, without Karen, without Aline. She signed. Darlene stepped forward from the corner of the room, where she'd been silent through the entire appointment. Her eyes glistened. She took the witness pen from Liam and signed her own name just below. You good? She asked softly. Helen nodded, voice low. I'm clear. Darlene swiped a finger just under her lashes and gave a smile. Well, hell. That deserves a martini. Helen let out the faintest laugh. You can have mine. I've got pre-op blood work. Outside, the sun had pushed through the gray, streaking gold across the sidewalk and catching in the corners of windshield like tiny flares. Helen walked a little slower than usual, her hips still stiff, but something in her posture was taller. Need help to the car? Darlene asked. No, Helen said. I just want to feel this, every step of it. They reached the parking lot in silence, the kind that didn't need to be filled. Helen paused before opening the car door. Did I ever tell you what Aaron said to me after Tom's funeral? Darlene raised a brow. No, he said. You'll never have to worry about anything, Mom. I'll make sure of it. Helen's smile was brittle. And I believed him. I actually thought he meant it. Darlene didn't rush to. She just looked at her, long and honest. Well, she said, he was half right. You don't have to worry anymore. But you made sure of it. Back at home, Helen folded the new will into her fireproof lockbox and placed it beneath the bag she'd started packing for the hospital. Socks, robe, the book she'd been too distracted to. She looked around the bedroom, the old dresser, the framed wedding photo, the hummingbird paperweight from her last birthday. It all felt lighter, like nothing here could be used against her anymore. She had built new walls, but she had also opened new windows. The phone rang just after 5. Karen. Helen answered on the second ring. It's locked in, Karen said. Friday morning. Dr. Epstein confirmed the team is ready. You'll be first on the... Helen smiled into the receiver. I'll be ready too. No eating after midnight, no stress, no surprises. I've had enough of those, Helen said. Karen's voice softened. You're not just getting your hip fixed, you're getting your freedom back. That's what this surgery really is. I know. And she did. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Helen wasn't being rescued. She was walking into that hospital whole, not because someone carried her, but because she hadn't let them. Tracy's text came in at 9:42 p.m., just a single sentence, no punctuation, no warmth. I hope you think about what you're doing to your own son before it's too late. Helen didn't even open it fully. She saw the preview on the lock screen, let it sit there for 3 seconds, then swiped it away like a smudge on glass. There had been too many messages like that lately, some angry, some faux concerned, some trying to reframe betrayal as family drama. But Helen had stopped entertaining false sentiment the moment she mailed that certified letter. She placed her phone on silent, set it face down on the nightstand, and turned back to the photo album in her lap. The living room was quiet, just the low hum of the dishwasher and the soft creak of the rocking. A yellow lamp cast a warm glow over the faded corners of old Tom laughing beside a grill, Aaron as a toddler with peanut butter smeared across his cheeks, a blurry snapshot of Helen in a red coat sitting beside a snow-covered tree. She traced her fingers over each image without bitterness. There were good years, real ones, but tonight she wasn't reviewing the past. She was editing it, deciding what to take forward and what to leave behind. Next to the album sat a leather-bound journal, half filled with letters she'd started writing after she met with Liam, not to anyone, just to herself. Some were angry, some tired, some handwritten in the middle of the night when the silence in the house felt too big. She picked it up, wrote the date, and jotted a single sentence. There is no legacy without love. Then she closed it. That was enough. By morning, Karen had arranged everything. A private transport van, not an ambulance, not a cab, just clean, professional, and quiet. The driver wore blue scrubs and greeted Helen with a respectful nod. He didn't ask questions, just opened the door and waited. Karen checked her watch as Helen buckled in. You ready? Helen nodded. Let's get it done. Dr. Epstein's already scrubbed in. I'll meet you in recovery, Karen said. But your welcome party's already at the hospital. Helen didn't have to ask who. Darlene was in the waiting room when they arrived, sitting in a corner chair with her feet tucked under her and a travel mug balanced. A crossword lay open in her lap, only half filled in. She stood as Helen was wheeled through the double door, her eyes warm but sharp. You know I'll be here when you wake up, right? She said softly. Helen reached out and squeezed her hand. I never doubted that. Then the doors swung shut, and the white of the hallway swallowed them. The operating room was bright, cold, efficient. Nurses moved with purpose, voices low but focused. Helen's name was checked, rechecked, IVs were placed. The anesthesiologist asked her to count backward from 100. She didn't make it past 94. When Helen woke, the first sensation was warmth. Not in the room, her body, her hip. Not pain exactly, just pressure. A deep, dull weight where the sharpness used to. The sterile ceiling tiles above her blurred for a moment, then came into focus. Someone was adjusting her blanket. A nurse smiled down at her. You're out of surgery. It went beautifully. Helen blinked slowly, lips dry but curled into the faintest smile. Not because the pain was gone, but because she was still here, still whole, still hers. The news didn't come from Aaron. Of course it didn't. It arrived the way such things often did in small towns, through whispers, through cousins, through the kind of phone calls that start with now, don't be shocked, but bankruptcy, filed under his firm's name and his own. Word spread quick. Uncle Terry called first, voice lowered as if Aaron could overhear through the line. I don't know all the details, Helen, but it looks bad. Creditors, liens, the works. I just thought you'd want to know before you heard it from anyone else. Helen sat back in her recliner, the hospital-issued compression socks still tugging at her calves, and said simply, thank you for telling. She didn't ask why. She didn't ask how. The why had already been written in forged checks and canceled surgery. The how was no longer her problem. A few days later, the first wave of get-well cards arrived. Not from family, not from old friends she hadn't heard from in years, but from the clinic staff. Bright, cheery cards with pastel flowers and balloon illustrations. each signed in different handwriting. We're rooting for you, Helen. Heal strong, Mrs. E. We'll see you at your follow-up. Karen had slipped one in, too. A plain white card, simple blue ink. The body heals when the spirit is steady. Yours is steady. Helen placed that one on the mantel, standing it upright between a framed photo of Tom in his fishing hat and a watercolor painting Darlene had given her years back. Darlene came by that Friday with a box of cookies, the lid warm against Helen's hands when she passed it over. They're still soft, Darlene said proudly. Don't say I never spoil you. They sat together in the living room. Helen's leg propped on a pillow, Darlene flipping through her phone with a grin that looked one part amused, one part wicked. You want to hear Tracy's latest? She asked. Helen arched a brow. I'm not sure. Oh, you do? She hit play on a short audio clip. Tracy's voice, sharp and nasal, filled the room. And now everyone thinks we're the bad one, when all we did was try. Do you know how humiliating it is to have neighbors whispering at the grocery store? I can't even show my face without someone smirking about that lawsuit. Darlene stopped the recording, already laughing. She posted that rant in some Facebook group and someone screen recorded it. It's making the rounds. Helen shook her head, lips curving. She always wanted an audience. Well, now she's got one. Just not the one she hoped. The two of them laughed until Helen's hip ached from shaking. It wasn't cruel laughter, it was relief. Laughter without weight. Later that evening, Helen opened her checkbook, not to pay a bill, not to cover someone else's mistake, but to write a donation. It wasn't everything she planned to leave in her will, just enough to matter. The Franklin County Elder Care Foundation accepted the gift with a phone call first. Warm, surprised, profoundly grateful. The director, a man with a gentle baritone, said, "You don't know what this means, Mrs. Everhart. We can expand our home visit program by 30%. Do you realize how many people that touches?" "Yes," Helen said. "I do." A week later, a letter arrived on thick paper, hand-signed in careful black ink. Your generosity ensures that seniors in our county will never be left alone to wonder if they matter. Thank you for choosing dignity, for yourself, and for others. Helen framed it and placed it beside her recliner. A quiet counterweight to every canceled surgery, every forged signature, every false word that had been used against her. One night, as the autumn air slipped cool through the window, she leaned back, tea in hand, and stared at that framed letter. It didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't erase Aaron, but it built something he never could. A legacy he hadn't earned, one she had claimed back. The cane clicked softly against the walkway, made her way down the drive. It wasn't the desperate leaning she'd done before surgery, nor the careful hobble of recovery. This was different, balanced, intentional. The morning air was crisp, sunlight pouring through the maple trees overhead, their leaves gone gold and copper. A few spiraled down as she walked, catching on her sweater before drifting to the ground. The whole neighborhood smelled faintly of wood smoke. Someone must have lit their first fire of the season. Helen reached the mailbox and tugged the door open. Metal cool against her palm, steady. A couple of grocery flyers, a water bill, and then an envelope, thick, glossy, stamped with a logo she didn't need to read twice. Franklin County Elder Care Foundation. She held it against her chest for a moment, then tucked it carefully beneath her arm before closing the mailbox with a firm clink. From next door, Darlene's voice called out, "Look at you. Morning victory lap?" Helen turned to see her friend standing at her garden fence, hair pulled into a loose bun, a mug of coffee steaming in her. "Something like that," Helen said, raising the envelope slightly. Darlene grinned. "Mail worth walking for?" Helen smiled but didn't answer. Not yet. She walked back inside slowly, savoring every step of the... At the kitchen table, she slid a butter knife carefully along the edge of the envelope and unfolded the newsletter within. Across the top, in bold letters, announcing the Helen Morris Health Grant. Her breath caught. She read the headline again, slower this time. The article beneath explained it. The Foundation's new program, funded by her early donation, providing home health services for low-income seniors across the nurses, aides, transportation stipend, all under her, not anonymous, not generic, her name. There it was in black and white, printed in a font that looked too large for something so personal. The Helen Morris Health Grant will ensure that no elder in Franklin County faces recovery alone. Helen's hands trembled, not with weakness, but with the weight of recognition. She wiped at her eyes with the edge of her... It wasn't loud crying, not the kind that leaves you gasping, just quiet tears. the kind that came when you realized you'd finally tipped the scale. For months, Erin had tried to make her invisible, erase her choices, spend her savings, sign her name. And now, her name was written in a way no one could erase. She folded the newsletter gently, as though it might break, and carried it to the fridge. The magnet shaped like a lighthouse still held her post-op instruction. She slid the paper beneath it, side by side with the checklist that had carried her through surgery, instructions and legacy, healing and permanent, her life in print. Outside, the leaves rustled. A breeze cut through the kitchen window, carrying the faint sound of children laughing on their way to school. The world moved forward, ordinary and unremarkable, but Helen stood there with her hand pressed to the newsletter, feeling something she hadn't in years, entirely unburdened. She thought of Aaron, of the look on his face when control first cracked on her doorstep, of Tracy, rehearsing her grievances into a phone that only fed her own echo, of all the ways they had tried to write her ending without asking her if she was finished. And she thought of the foundation, of Darlene's laughter filling her kitchen, of Karen's card on the mantel, of Liam's quiet steadiness across a desk stacked with. She thought of Tom, and she whispered, almost to herself, "I'm all right now." Helen settled into her recliner, the framed thank you letter from the foundation on one side, the newsletter. Her cane leaned within reach, but no longer a lifeline. She closed her eyes, the light shifting across her face through the autumn branches, and she said the words aloud. Not for Aaron, not for Tracy, not even for the family who whispered half-truths over phone lines, for herself. He tried to decide when my life ended. I decided when it really began.